that gets back to the thing though, is that people don't always see the whole story. And we're just flooded with this message that those terrorists are coming to get us next, which is absurd. Has any member of Hamas or anybody of a Palestinian come and threatened America as an American? No, that's not what they're about. The thing is but that's the tactic that's used, is that we have to plaster them as being these jihadists when they're nothing like that.
Are they, I'm sure you've dealt with Hamas or know people
Sure.
who are, right? Are they religious fanatics? Are they jihadis?
Not the people that I know. Like I said, when I was again in at the school, we had a couple teachers, Muslim men, and there were some elections going on. And it wasn't Hamas then. It was the social party or something. But it was definitely a Muslim religious party. I would have voted for those guys because they weren't corrupt. They wanted to serve their people, and that's what it was about. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen anywhere. I'm not totally ingrained in the community, but the vibe there isn't one of wanting everybody to convert to Islam and forcing it upon them at all. And the purpose of Hamas is primarily to resist and to protect their people and their land.
A deleted segment from an American Palestinian Christian nun's interview with Tucker Carlson has leaked, and it's blowing up across the internet. We're talking tens of millions of views across platforms, despite every effort by YouTube, social media algorithms, and the usual suspects to bury it. This isn't your typical political soundbite. This is testimony stripped of religious bias, stripped of political spin, just a clear-eyed account of what's really going on. And let me tell you, this nun isn't mincing words, and that's exactly why the church ought to shield her from the inevitable backlash. I took this deleted part, the bit they clearly didn't want out there, and I've pushed it so far into the open that the algorithm can't ignore it anymore. So, take a second to like this video, because that's how we make sure more people get to hear this truth. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it, because we're building something they can't silence.
So don't tell me these soldiers make mistakes. You could, the church in Gaza has, it's pointed and the cross is there in the middle of it by itself. So it's hard to believe that it wasn't
So what would you say? What would you say to Ted Cruz, the self-proclaimed Christian, supporting tank shells fired at crosses? Like, what is that?
Well, I would say, again, it's to disabuse of the notion. It's those same talking points that the congressman gave. Well, but Hamas is the problem, and they're terrorists. Well, Hamas is not the problem. So don't use that as an excuse anymore. And we have to defend Christian values, American values, and dignity, freedom for people. Isn't that what we're all about? Having their rights.
What happens on the Temple Mount? What is the Temple Mount? Can you explain what that is?
Well, the Temple Mount is the area where the temple existed at the time of Christ.
In Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem, right. Directly, I lived in the convent of St. Mary Magdalene on the Mount of Olives. Directly in front of me is the Dome of the Rock, and there's the old walls, the walls of the old city. And within that is the area where the temple had existed, right? There was also a Byzantine church at one point in the 5th century, because where the Dome of the Rock is where Abraham sacrificed or was going to sacrifice his son Isaac.
Yeah.
So it's holy to all monotheistic traditions.
Yes.
And so on the left side, if you're looking from the convent where I was at, is the Wailing Wall. That's a portion of the temple that still exists, a wall. And so some, just like the Christian Zionists, the Jews want the temple rebuilt. So I know Christians who have been there who will take a sign and go take the crescent off the dome and say, we'll put a cross on there. Yeah. It's natural to all of them to do. So there is this movement to rebuild the temple. All the time I was there, I heard about that, but and there was small movement of it.
But there's a mosque where the temple was.
Yeah, now it's Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's the third holiest site for Muslims in the world. And a lot of confrontations you have is because Israel will control getting in and out, being able to go there. So, or they'll say only men over 50 can go to the mosque today. And there's a lot of confrontations there, and people have been killed. So it is a mosque. Yeah, there's a functioning Al-Aqsa Mosque is there.
But so you can't build the temple with a mosque there?
No. And they say that they have the plans for rebuilding the temple and everything. And people like Ben-Gvir, the minister who's a religious zealot, have gone on the Temple Mount. And it's a provocation. The area is controlled by religiously by Jordan. But there's an organization that's responsible for that area.
Okay, so you hear people say we're going to rebuild the temple, the third temple, but there's a mosque there. So what's the plan for the mosque?
Well, I guess it would be to blow it up.
And then you just said that's the third holiest site in
Islam, of course. This would be a dark day for anybody.
So then what would happen if you blew up the third holiest site in Islam?
Well, you could probably answer that better than me. It certainly would ignite a great conflict in the world.
I just want to say this out loud because people sort of blithely talk about it.
What we're really coming to. And I think that's the problem with the Christian Zionists is that what is your end game here? Well, their belief tells them that's okay. We want to have this third world war because we're going to be taken away and we'll be okay. And we'll come back later after all the fighting's done. That's sort of basically what their theology tells them. And in the meantime, all the Jews are supposed to convert to their brand of Christianity or die in the conflagration.
And so I'm asking you this because you're a nun.
Right.
That's not a Christian. It's not
a Christian belief, no. Or precept.
Any idea where that came from? That idea?
The rapture?
Yeah.
Well, like I said, originally the idea of having the 1,000-year kingdom is a heresy that was in the early church. But the real push of all that comes from the 1830s. James Darby Schofield, or John Darby Schofield. It's a new theology that has no basis in the foundations of Christianity. It has nothing to do with it.
How do you think this story ends?
It depends on us. And that's why, maybe I part of me wants to have that message of that we have to do something politically. The Christians have to wake up and tell their because it's all in the hands of the United States. It doesn't matter what any other country in the world does. If U.S. protects Israel, this will continue.
One of the most striking parts of her testimony was about the so-called Greater Israel Project. For years, if you even mentioned it, they'd label you a conspiracy theorist. But now, we've got war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu himself admitting he's all in, paired with aggressive, illegal settlement expansions in the West Bank that make it plain as day.
So what is a plan? Are we in such a world where we can look on live TV that too many people are just slowly going to die now? Or are you going to transfer them? And why should they be transferred? Why should they have to leave their land that they've been in for centuries? And in Gaza, Gaza is, as much as the West Bank, Gaza, the St. Porphyrius Church from the 3rd century was bombed. We also have in the Orthodox...
How did a Christian church get bombed?
Because it's part of Palestinians. And I've been there before.
It's not just Palestine and Israel where the Christian population has shrunk. It seems like throughout the Levant.
Yes. And I think that's part of the whole Greater Israel Project. Isn't it so ironic that they've made such a big
targeting Christians?
Targeting Christians, yeah. Well, targeting to make control for Israel, for example, in Syria. I went to Syria in 2004, and I went to the convent of St. Thecla, where outside of Damascus, in Malula, where the nuns were kidnapped by ISIS, right? And the population is over 10% Christian, and you have ancient Christian sites as well as vibrant monastic communities there and vibrant churches and hospitals that were run by the church in Syria and Lebanon, right? And now, what have we done? And so Assad wasn't perfect. Saddam Hussein wasn't perfect. But the Middle East is not the United States. And we tried to impose ourselves there and get rid of these governments who, for all the repression, also kept the people together, allowed minorities to survive there.
Including Christians.
Including Christians, yeah. And Christians, yeah. And just recently, and so I find it mind-boggling that now we take sanctions off after Assad is gone, and we put in place someone who was Daesh, who was part of ISIS. Does a leopard change its spots?
And how are the Christians in Syria
we had the
doing
bombing.
that?
We had the very, if you may, I'd like to look for the statement from Patriarch John of Antioch, whose brother was a bishop and was kidnapped in 2010 and presumed to be dead now. And in June, there was a bombing a suicide bombing in the church in Damascus, Mar Elias. And Patriarch John, he didn't pull any punches. He came and he said he gave a eulogy, but he also called out the government because they didn't really condemn the act at all, the ISIS government. And he says, Apostle Paul, in his epistle to the Romans, for whether we live to the Lord, and whether we die to the Lord. The rock of our faith is the Lord who rose from the dead, and the martyrs who lie before us today are children of the resurrection. They dwell in the divine light. They did not die, they are alive. They have passed on, even if in this horrific way, to the one whom they loved. He's living like we're supposed to live as Christians, is talking at it, the Christians there. But then he says, but I will say boldly, Mr. President, Abu Jalani, Ashara, the former head of HTS, head of the ISIS group, we deeply regret, Mr. President, that in the immediate aftermath of the crime, not a single government or state official was present at the scene, except for Mrs. Hind Kabawat, a Christian. We regret that deeply. We are an integral component of this nation, and we are here to stay. Let me remind you, the two archbishops of Aleppo, Bulus and Johanna, were kidnapped, and much was said at the time. The Malula nuns were also kidnapped, and here we still are. This heinous crime was committed the day before yesterday, and we will remain here. We appeal to you, Mr. President, for a government that does not get distracted by issuing unnecessary decisions unworthy of mention from the sacred royal door. We call for a government that takes responsibility and shares in the suffering of its people. Mr. President, the people are hungry. If some have not told you, I am telling you, honorable, come and take care of your people. I think that's pretty bold for a guy who had his brother kidnapped, just had a number of parishioners bombed, and he's telling someone who has been known to be a terrorist, calling him out.
That's pretty bold.
It's pretty bold.
I would say that's pretty bold.
Yeah.
So the government of Syria now, the government run by the former ISIS leader, is pro-Israel.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the whole plan. And, when you get to it, they talked about from the river to the sea, right? Where did that statement come from? Look at the charter of Likud, the party of Netanyahu. They very clearly say from the Jordan to the Mediterranean is going to be Israel. And really from the Nile to the Euphrates, which means going into Iraq, into the edges of Egypt and up to Salah. So that's why we had the war in Iraq. Why did our young people have to die? Why did we have to spend so much money on a war? I was supposed to visit Iraq in early 2000s. Our school secretary, her father was born in Mosul, and he was a Syrian Christian. And so this is an opportunity to go and visit him. And that's when they started chopping off the heads and doing things. So we thought better of making that part of the trip. But how many Christians were displaced from Iraq during that time?
Almost all of them.
Almost all of them. And now in Syria, you're seeing the same thing, which in 2004, I saw vibrant communities. I saw people who could live, even under Assad, as Christians. Now, they're in fear for what's going to happen to them.
I mean, it's hard to see this as an accident. So West Bank, Gaza, Iraq,
some sort of plan.
Syria, Lebanon, all places where U.S. foreign policy touches at the behest of Israel see the destruction of Christian communities.
Right.
I'm guessing that's not an accident.
No, not at all. It's definitely part of a plan. But the thing is, why should we be supporting that plan? And also, we're focusing on the Christians, but I said we had girls who were Russian background who lived in the cities of Israel. And what you've seen the last 20 years too, instead of that nascent peace movement, instead of people who tolerated their neighbor and could live with their neighbor, it's become a totally militant society. The girls I know that are there now, it's a lot of aggression and a lot of hatred. And how many Israelis have that? You're having big problems in Greece now. I don't know if you've seen the demo. I'm a Greek, right?
Yeah.
People are parading through the streets because Israelis have left Israel, even though they're the ones that have all the defense, right? All the protection. Even what kind of a country is Netanyahu trying to have? Do you really want to live in a militarized country that's always in fear? And always thinking that they're under attack when they don't have to be.
You say it's more hostile. You see these videos of Christians, priests with crucifixes around their necks getting spit on in Jerusalem. Are those real?
Yes. And I mean, that's happened before, even from the first days that I was there. There'd be occasionally something like that. And occasionally there were graffiti put on walls and, sprayed on Jesus a monkey. 2013. On a church. Yeah, that was right. In Tabka, where the multiplication of the loaves and the fish, a Catholic community, graffiti there, talking about getting rid of the idols or something like that, some sort of Old Testament statement, and burning a statue of the Virgin Mary in parts of the monastery there. So, but that was a small segment. Like even at that time, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich were like sort of outcasts in Israel. They weren't the prominent members of Israeli society and what they represented in those religious zealots of it. But now they are in power. And they're dominating everything. And they say sometimes that if the Israelis didn't have the Palestinians, there'd be a civil war between the secular and the religious Jews, which is true. That's what happened.
There's enormous tension.
Yeah.
Enormous.
Sure. Yeah,
do you know anyone who's been spit on? Any Christians who've been spit on?
Me.
You've been spit on?
Of course, yeah.
What do you mean, of course? That's disgusting.
Yeah, well, but that's the least of it. That's the least of it.
But again, I'm saying this as a perspective, from the perspective of someone who lives in a majority Christian country that's paying for all of this.
Right.
So that's kind of
that's the mentality. Or I'll tell you a story. My father is a priest, right? A Greek Orthodox, and he was wearing a collar suit. He visited one time, and we visited the town of Taiba. And there was a checkpoint before you enter into the town.
Can you give us perspective? Where is Taiba?
Taiba is biblical Ephraim. It's when Christ, after he raised Lazarus from the dead, he went about 10 miles to the northeast of Jerusalem, Bethany area, to prepare himself before he would come back to Jerusalem for his crucifixion. Ephraim is known as the town of compassion, of solace. Even in the time of Saladin, it was called Ephraim. It's now called Taiba, which means the good or the beautiful. So it sort of had that reputation. So he went there to prepare himself for his crucifixion. 20 miles, not even 20 miles from Jerusalem.
Interesting. So with your father, who was
my dad,
a pretty
priest,
famous,
an American priest, dressed as a priest, and my mom was there too. So we were going to drive it. So there's a checkpoint sort of at the entrance of the town, and then you have many olive groves. Which, by the way, I was just talking to someone the other day. They have about 8,000 acres of land, let's say, and over a quarter of it has been confiscated either by settlers and the army allowing them to take their olive groves. And they have no recourse. There's nothing.
Who owns the land?
The Palestinian Christian families.
And it's been confiscated from Christian families?
Well, confiscate, what do you do when they have guns and you don't?
I don't know. You call your patron church in the West and you say, raise a stink,
okay.
Call Ted Cruz.
Right. Well,
and
we
other
called Mike
self-described Christian. Mike
Huckabee came, right? And then the only thing
So what did Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel?
He said he was very concerned because also it happened, which they didn't. There's 3 churches in Taiba, an Orthodox, Greek Catholic, and Catholic, and there's also the ruins of a 4th century church that still partially stands, and people will still go there sometimes. Not full services, but just to be at the spot. It's a place that was built by St. Helen in the 4th century, Church of St. George. Settlers burned the brush, and also there's a cemetery right next to it, burned that area.
They burned the cemetery?
Everything's stone there, so nothing burns, but they burned the area around there. So you have grass and brush, that was burned. Yeah. And not only that, I was shocked when I saw how much they've infiltrated. It's one thing, the entrance of town, and you've taken the open land, the olive groves. They have Bedouin, like in that town, there's a beer factory, a distillery, a hotel, and Bedouins have been forced off their land around there and are now living with allowance of the Christians to be there because they have no place else to go and no one to protect them. So Ambassador Huckabee comes and he's very concerned because an attack on a church. And also that same week, a Palestinian American had been shot dead by settlers or beaten to death. Saif Musalat, 20 miles, not even 20, a couple miles away. And he was going to address that as a Palestinian American to see that Israel would investigate. Nobody's been arrested or done.
He's an American citizen?
Yes, he's from Florida. He's often, just like
I'm a American citizen was beaten to death?
By settlers.
And no one was arrested?
No, never happens. Down in Hebron, just there. And my concern in talking to you.
And we're sure that happened?
We're absolutely sure that happened. Yeah,
How can an American citizen be beaten to death in an Israeli-controlled area paid for by the United States and nobody does anything about it?
Well, this is our problem, isn't it? Yep.
I'm sorry, I keep stepping on your story. So Ambassador Huckabee shows up.
He shows up and he says, he's very concerned about what happened and we're going to check it. The next day, settlers were there with cows marching through the town with their cows. So it shows that they are in control. And not only that, just a couple days ago, this is a week after he's been there, in the Bible, there's a story of Ruth. One of the women in Taiba is married to she's a Greek American, married. They met in school in Boston. They got married. He was going to business school, her husband. He came back to Palestine to establish the business. She goes with her husband, becomes Palestinian, going to care for the people of his nation. She got a PhD at Harvard. She's written books about the Holy Land, and with the sales of those books, little by little, she visited parishes in America, and she raised money so that they could build 30 homes for Orthodox people. So those homes cars of the people in those homes were burned the other day, and there's graffiti again on the wall, and it names another village, and it says, "You're going to regret this." And the rest, I talked to 2 Israeli people who are from Israel, and they couldn't even decipher the top part. So, because it's very interesting. A lot of the settlers are actually people from Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
They have dual citizenship. And they go back and forth between freely. They can go to Ben Gurion Airport, go through Tel Aviv to come to the settlements in the West Bank. But those people in Taiba, who are actually American citizens as well, they can't go through Ben Gurion Airport.
How is it that an American citizen can't go through Ben Gurion Airport?
Because he's also a Palestinian.
Are you sure?
I'm absolutely sure. Yes. They have to go through Jordan. And right now, through a border that is controlled on one side by Israel. And right now it's so difficult. They only open for, I've been told, from 8 to 1 or 2. And you've got thousands of people trying to come through, right? So you could be there for hours and you may not get through that day.
She also dives into something the early Christian theologians were nearly unanimous about, that Israel's covenant role was fulfilled and transformed in Christ. The church, made up of every nation under heaven, is the new or true Israel.
There is that Judeo-Christian heritage when you're destroying the very foundations of it. St. Jerome translated the Bible in Bethlehem. The cells where he was at are under the Church of the Nativity. The very roots of our Christian heritage are there, and we're letting it be destroyed. Not physically physically by killing the people, but also there's a wonderful person. When you talk about resistance, this all started with Hamas. So for the most part, I would say they're a resistance move. They're simply people fighting for their people, trying to protect their land. And I don't know if we want to reach into the area of the whole problem is that it was never defined what Palestine is. The Oslo Accords took place, and then there was nothing there was area A, B, and C, and you didn't have a Palestine. So little by little, Israel just keeps taking over the land, confiscating, building the settlements, adding the checkpoints, and strangling the life of anybody living there. Now I lost my train of thought. I'm going to
The destruction of the temple was God's final judgment, a clear sign that his presence would never again be tied to a building of stone. And they warned centuries ago that if a physical temple were ever rebuilt, it wouldn't be some divine restoration. It could actually mark the rise of end times rebellion or deception. The real temple now is spiritual, made up of believers across the world, not confined to a strip of contested land in Jerusalem. That's the reality the early church knew, and it's the one modern Christians need to remember. And here's where the nun gets blunt. Modern evangelicalism in America, with its heretical theology, has shattered the unified teaching of the church on Israel's role in salvation history. They've twisted doctrine, spread lies, and weaponized scripture to justify settler brutality, giving cover to people who have zero interest in living out Jesus' compassion toward the oppressed, especially toward the persecuted people of Palestine. It's a betrayal of the gospel in the very land where Christ walked. This interview isn't just a news clip. It's a moment of clarity in a world drowning in propaganda, and the fact that they tried to delete it tells you everything you need to know. The question now is, will we share it loudly enough that they can't make it disappear? Thank you so much for watching. Your support means the world to me, especially right now. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe. It's one of the biggest ways you can help us keep going. Until next time, God bless you.